Every morning, it's the same thing. People lining up at the pumps that seem to always be full. I've seen fights erupt when someone cuts the line at the pump, and dear God, don't get in the way of them, ordering their gallon-sized bucket of coffee to go with their suadero egg, wrapped in dough and deep fried, part of this nutritious breakfast. Every morning, it looks like an army of ants on crack, running around and grabbing whatever food type, substances and drinks they can, then taking their usual position, have been patiently waiting in line. I love the different poses. The watch watcher. They must glance at their watch every 2 seconds to show how much they're being inconvenienced. These are usually the ones getting into a Mercedes or BMW when they leave. I don't know why they don't get their breakfast catered. I'm sure they can afford it. The foot tapper usually. They have something stuck in their ear and can't hear their order being called. The heavy sigher exhales loudly every third time. The watch watcher checks the time, and when the foot tapper has to be told to move up in line, as if anyone could hear him over the music that's blaring so loud over the speakers, making it so easy for everyone. Did I happen to mention I work here? Sometimes I wonder why after the things I've seen. Not just the idiots, but other things. Much darker things, but we'll get to that. Every morning I have to deal with these idiots. Is it still called road rage if you feel it in a gas station? As much as I hate them, customers are actually the easiest part of my job. I mean, who wouldn't want to go out in the middle of the night when the temperature is below zero and the wind is howling to change the bags in the trash cans because it's the appointed time? And who appointed the time? You ask why. The manual, of course. The corporate bean counters have done studies and fun focus groups or some nonsense to decide the perfect time of day, or in this case night, to empty the trash. It's all in the manual. The manual is your friend. The manual is your God. The manual must be obeyed at all costs. That's what the manual says. So if it's cleaning the toilets, emptying the trash, washing out the coffee makers, the manual tells us exactly when and how to do it. That's a load off my mind. I don't even have to worry about not knowing how to clean a toilet. The manual tells me. What it doesn't tell me is what happens when the power goes out. Only at our station every night. Exactly at 2 a man comes back on an AM. I've seen this so many times. I watch the McDonald's beside us, and their lights never go out. What's even stranger is the security cameras. Never seem to pick it up. I've reviewed the recordings. Number loss of power ever shows. What does happen is somehow the timestamp on the video suddenly shoots from 2 AM to a... like those 2 minutes never existed. The corporate techies call it a glitch and tell me to ignore it. The rest of us don't mention it. Not if we know what's good for us. But I know why it happens. I don't tell anyone for fear of being sent to. Is it corporate who keeps us shaking in terror at the potential of letting outsiders know what happens during those 2 missing minutes? Every night, yes and no. It's something much closer, much darker, something that could. I guess the best way to describe it would be to tell the story of Kenny. I know when I first heard his name, I did the famous line from South Park. Oh no, they killed Kenny. It used to make me chuckle. I don't do that anymore. He started working here around 5 months ago. Well, has it really been that long anyway? But I keep going. My body may not work properly, but my brain still does. And I focus on expanding my knowledge in various areas. My fiancé and I just left a sober living house about a month ago. We've been clean for almost a year now and are doing really good. We graduated from the sober living and found a little 3-bedroom house. We gave the landlord the money. He was just another goofy teenager. And went over to the house to start loading our stuff. There was also a little so we walked back there and opened it up to put some of the boxes inside. Beneath a piece of plywood, my fiancé saw something moving. He thought it was an animal, so he walked over and picked up the piece of plywood. There was a homeless drug addict sleeping under there, with his crack pipe and syringe still in hand. Starting his first job after high school, we tried to be nice to him and explain that we were moving in, and that he would have to find somewhere else to sleep. We even told him about the program we just left, and that it was a really good place. We offered to give him the phone number. This guy narrows his eyes at us angrily and says, "I don't need shit from nobody. I don't trust nobody either, and neither should you." The way he said it was absolutely creepy. Not that I was an elder scholar or anything. He strode off down the road and kept glancing back at us. That should have been our clue not to move in, but we'd already given the landlord the money, and we felt we were without any other option at this point, so we moved our things in and tried the next couple of days. A few days later, my fiancé and this same guy was standing in the road. I only started here a year just staring at my house like a maniac. It was just me and the girlfriend home alone, so I was terrified. I called my fiancé and told him what was going on, but by the time he was getting ready to leave work, the guy had already vanished. I don't know what he was planning on doing, and I swear, I'm not one to judge people. I'm a recovering addict myself, and I've been homeless more than once. He was fun to work with, and we instantly became buddies. But the whole thing was just really ominous and threatening. About a week later, there was a shooting death. About 3 houses down from us. That was it. We packed our shit and left and said, fuck that house. I don't know who was involved in the shooting, but after we packed up our shit, a friend of mine was telling me that the guy we found in our shed, we loved to goof off during the night shift, was also convicted of sexual assault, and that he had just been released from prison, and that's why he was homeless. Needless to say, I don't want to ever meet that guy again. Nor will I ever go back to that neighborhood. We moved 2 hours away and are staying with my mom. I don't usually post here, but I need to tell someone, because I feel like I'm losing my mind. Just us working together. This started a week ago, when I found my old diary from when I was 10. I hadn't thought about it in years, but I came across it in a dusty box in my attic while I was cleaning out some stuff for a garage sale. I was excited at first, you know, like a piece of my childhood. I started flipping through the pages, reading about my 5th grade drama, crushes and random little notes about my day. The place was usually dead from midnight until 5. But then I found something weird. There's an entry in the diary that I don't remember writing at all. It's dated March 16th, 2011, which would have been the day after my 11th birthday. It starts off normal. Me talking about the party and gifts I got. Then it takes a turn. There's a section where I wrote, Mom says I shouldn't go into the attic anymore. We would rush around to get all of our chores done, but I keep hearing whispers up there. Last night they called my name. I froze when I read that. I didn't remember anything like that happening. The writing was mine, or at least it looked like it. After that entry, the diary goes back to being about school and friends. I tried to brush it off as a weird childhood memory, or maybe my imagination running wild. But then things started happening around the house, so we had some free time more than once. Little things at first. I'd hear creaks in the attic above my room at night. I figured it was just the house settling. But then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps. 2 nights ago, it got worse. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of something moving upstairs. Not just footsteps, but dragging. like something heavy was being pulled across the floor. We got into chicken nugget battles. My heart was pounding. But I forced myself to go up there. When I opened the attic door, the dragging stopped, but the air felt thick, like someone was watching me. Yesterday, I decided to read more of the diary that I definitely don't remember writing. It said he's in the attic again. He wants me to come back. He says he's lonely, which would have us cleaning up. But I don't want to go up there anymore. Mom says it's dangerous, but he keeps calling my name. Here's the thing, my mom never said anything about the attic being dangerous. In fact, we rarely used it. So where did this come from, and who the hell is he? Last night I woke up to whispers. Not creaks or footsteps this time, actual whispers. I swear to God I heard my name right before the morning rush. Just like in the diary, but when I went to check, the attic was empty. I don't know what to do. I'm starting to feel like I'm losing it. I thought about burning the diary, but something is stopping me. I keep thinking, maybe I'll find answers if I keep reading it. But I'm also terrified. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Could this be some sort of childhood trauma resurfacing? Help came on. Or is it possible for an old diary to somehow change? Hey everyone. I wanted to share an update. Since so many of you were invested in my story and offered such great advice, things have taken a strange turn since my last post, and I feel like I need to process it all. After I found that last eerie diary entry, I didn't sleep well. The whispers continued every night. We found out exactly where the cameras could, growing more persistent and unsettling. I kept hearing my name, but as my mind played tricks on me. A couple of nights later, I decided I couldn't keep ignoring. I figured it was time to face my fears and confront whatever was in the attic. Yes, I know. It's really bad to go to the attic again, and this is how I die in horror movies. And couldn't see. I grabbed the diary and a flashlight and made my way up there, my heart racing the entire time. Once I opened the attic door, the air felt colder and the atmosphere was heavy. I took a deep breath and scanned the room. It was dark with only the faint beam of my flashlight cutting through the shadows. I had hoped maybe I would find something that would help me understand, and hid from them while we held our battles. Why I had those strange memories from childhood. As I rummaged through some old boxes, I came across a small dusty trunk. I opened it, and inside were various childhood items, old toys, school projects, and even some of my old drawings. But then I found something that made my stomach drop. Weathered toy figure of a man that looked almost like the creepy figure from my dreams. We became so good at it, I didn't remember owning it. But there was something unsettling about it. The moment I touched it, I felt a rush of emotions. Sadness and something else that I couldn't quite place. I dropped it in shock and stumbled accidentally backward, knocking over a stack of boxes. That's when I heard it, the distinct sound of whispering. Again, I couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely my name being called, that the night security guys would call. Panicking, I bolted out of the attic, slamming the door behind me. And I didn't stop until I was back in my bedroom. Heart pounding that night, I decided to call my mom. I hadn't talked to her about the experiences I'd been having. I explained everything, and there was a long silence on the line before she responded and asked us where we were. Yes. After your 11th birthday, you started acting differently. You talked about a friend you had in the attic. You said he wanted you to play with him. I thought it was just an imaginary friend, but I started hearing strange noises too. Footsteps and whispers coming from upstairs. I became worried and decided to keep you away from the attic. I didn't want to scare you. Hearing this sent chills down my spine. The corporate bean counters monitored us day and night. I had completely forgotten about those memories, and now they were flooding back. She said she didn't think it was anything malicious, just strange happenings. But it was unsettling enough for her to decide to leave. I felt a mix of relief and confusion. Maybe I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe there was something to these childhood memories, and the diary after all. After I hung up, Big Brother was always watching. I felt a sense of clarity, but also lingering dread. For the past few nights, I've been trying to sleep with the diary by my side, hoping it might reveal more about what happened. I still hear the whispers occasionally, but they seem to have faded a bit. I'm thinking about reaching out to someone who specializes in childhood trauma and memory recovery to help me understand everything better. More than once. Thank you all for your support. I'll keep you updated if anything else happens. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have a scary story you'd like me to read on the channel, please send me an email or post it to my subreddit. You can find details of this in the video description. It's the stories that make this. And this is the best way to ensure variety in the stories I share. We discussed the option of tearing down the cameras. And a special thanks to my channel members and patrons, who now have special access to ad-free videos and other behind-the-scenes content, and visiting corporate headquarters to shove them well in some very interesting and anatomically uncomfortable areas of management's collective persons. But as for what happened to Kenny, we were having one of our nugget battles. When Kenny gave a shout, I went over to see what was wrong and found him holding his cheek. He said something sharp hit him. I told him I was just throwing nuggets. When he looked down and found the offending object, he picked up a nugget that was broken in half. But there was something sticking out of it. We looked, and there was what looked like a woman's diamond engagement ring. We debated back and forth how it could have gotten lodged in there. When Kenny pulled it out and found the meat perfectly formed around it, I don't think it got stuck in there. Kenny said, I think it was processed this way. That would mean, I said, that someone was accidentally processed in the meat machine. Kenny said, finishing my thought, are we sure it wasn't an accident? I asked even as the words came out of my mouth. I knew how ludicrous they sounded. That kind of thing only happened in the movies. Didn't it? Kenny's eyes locked onto mine, and I could tell he was thinking the same thing. I looked up and saw that we were in the camera's view. Stick that thing in your pocket quick, I said. Kenny obeyed, and we went about cleaning up as usual, but I could tell it was bothering him. Forget about that thing, man. I told him it was just some weird coincidence. How many chicken nuggets have you eaten from this place? He said with a haunted look in his eye. I thought for a moment, knowing the answer was much higher than I wanted it to be. In fact, thinking about the ring and the potential source for the meat in the nugget made me feel ill. It doesn't matter. I won't be eating anymore. I said to Kenny, what about that poor woman and her family? And he asked what about her. I said, my eyes nervously darting toward the nearest camera, doesn't she deserve more than that? Kenny continued, what do you want me to do? Hunt down her family and tell them where we found the ring? Kenny's eyes lit up. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Out of that man. I said, hoping it would be enough to give him second thoughts. He shrugged and went about his cleaning duties. But from that moment on, he changed. Every time he was on break, he would look things up on his phone. More than once I glanced over, and he was looking at missing person sites and making notes on ones that were in the area. The longer he investigated this, the less he was interested in anything else. I swear it was like he was slowly turning into a zombie. All he did was stare at his phone and make notes. I came in the break room, and he was just motionless, his eyes were open, but focused on some point off in the distance. It was the creepiest thing I'd ever seen. "You okay, Kenny?" I asked. He slowly turned toward me like some possessed doll. "I'm fine." "Ah, okay." I said, "I know who she is." He said to me, "Who?" "Who is?" I asked. "The woman whose ring we found." He replied. "Okay, who is she?" I proceeded. "She worked at the distribution center." He said to me, "You mean the company's distribution center, where we get all our products?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "How did you find that out?" I asked him. I asked a lot of questions. He replied, "Asked who?" He stared at me with an intensity in his eyes. People. "What people?" I asked. He turned slowly and looked up at one of the cameras. "It's not important," he said, looking away from the camera and resuming his unfocused stare. "You okay, man?" I asked him. "Yeah." "I'm fine," he said in a monotone voice. "It's just I waited for a long moment for him to finish his sentence, but he just sat there, like someone had hit his pause button. Just what I said, he jumped like I'd startled him awake. "What do you mean, what?" I said you were talking and just stopped. "I did," he asked. "Yeah." "What was I saying?" he asked me. "That's what I was trying to find out." I replied. "What?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah." He questioned. "No." What I said. What he said. I shook my head in frustration. "Never mind," I said, walking away, leaving him sitting there staring into space. I couldn't figure out if he was messing with me or if something had happened. Had he really been tracking down where that ring came from? Had he really run across some people who scared him so bad they turned him into this zombie? I decided it was time for some answers. After our shift was over, I followed him home. He didn't go home. He drove to the distribution center and parked in a secluded spot outside the fence where his car wouldn't be seen. I waited for him to get out of sight before I parked my car and followed him. He stalked through the woods, outside the fence for a while, until he came to a section that came apart. When he pulled on it, he slipped inside, and I followed suit. After he was out of sight, I came around the corner and found him sitting at a picnic bench, smoking a cigarette. I stayed back and watched, shocked that I'd never seen him smoke before. I wondered why he would break in here, just to smoke a cigarette. The answer came quickly. The door of the warehouse opened, and 3 people stepped out. I held my breath thinking he'd been caught, but he was calm and continued to sit at the bench. In fact, the people who had come out began talking to him. He even offered one of them a cigarette. It was then I realized they were in the same outfit he was wearing. The company didn't have different uniforms. For those who worked at the stations and those who worked in the distribution center, they chatted for a few minutes. Then they all got up and went back inside, Kenny included. It was brilliant. He slipped right inside. No fuss, no muss. I figured, what the hell? It worked for Kenny. As I walked up and sat at the same picnic table, I didn't know how long it would be until the next break, so I tried a different approach. I knocked on the door for each time I knocked. I became more anxious that a security guard would show up and arrest me for trespassing. Finally, after knocking, The door opened. I stepped back. When I saw a security guard standing there, I hesitated well. The large man said in a deep voice, "Well, what was all I could think to answer back? Well, are you going to come in or not?" It took my brain a moment to comprehend what he said. Yes. I said, diving through the door. He shut it behind me with a loud bang. It sounded like my dorm. I knew he was onto me. He was just getting me inside so he could contain me. And I couldn't get away. I stood there vapor locked, unable to move for fear of what the guard would do. He stared at me, his eyes boring into mine, as though sucking every secret out of me. "What do you think you're doing?" He said, I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," he said, folding his arms in front of his massive chest. "No, I don't know anything." I said, hoping my knees wouldn't start knocking. "All right, enough of this." He said. I started to shake. I'd never been to prison, in fact. I'd never gotten in serious trouble in my life. And now here I was breaking and entering, even though I didn't really break. I just knocked and entered. I wondered if the judge would take that into account. "You've had your break, now get back to work," he said. I stared at him dumbfounded. "Excuse me, you heard me. The company doesn't pay you to stand around. Get back to work." "Yes, sir," I said, feeling the weight of a prison sentence lift from my shoulders. I took a step, then stopped. "Which way is it?" "To where they process the chicken nuggets." I asked. The guard rolled his eyes. "Freaking newbies," he muttered. "Follow the red line." He pointed at the floor, where several different colored lines ran down the middle of the hallway and disappeared into the distance. "Thanks," I said, quickly following the red line away from him. It led down a long hallway, right up to a large set of double doors that read. I looked left and right, but there was no sign of Kenny. I stepped in through the double doors to a huge room full of conveyor belts. I looked around, but it was impossible to tell anyone apart. When they were wearing hairnets and face masks, I hadn't made it 2 steps until I heard, "What do you think you're doing?" A woman dressed in a white coat accosted me. "You know you're not supposed to be on the floor without your hairnet and mask on." She shoved a hairnet on my head, then hooked a mask around my ears. "Now where's your station?" she demanded. I said, my eyes darting around as she watched me impatiently. "How long have you worked here?" She said, seeing my indecision first day. I lied. She sighed heavily. "You're not even supposed to be on the floor yet. You have videos to watch." I shrugged. "Wait here," she said. "I'll go find someone to take you upstairs and start your videos." I waited long enough for her to leave the room. Then I roamed around trying to find Kenny. I walked past line after line of people, sorting through chunks of meat, tossing aside parts that weren't usable, or at least weren't usable for the main product. The bad parts were tossed into plastic bins as I walked by. I saw some interesting things in the bins. There were little pieces of shiny objects, dark blobs I couldn't identify, rocks, loose change, and I swear, as I passed the people on the line, took a second away from their work to shoot me nasty glances. I guess having someone stare over their shoulder who wasn't a supervisor was taboo. As I walked by, someone grabbed me and pulled me over to the line beside them. "What the hell are you doing here?" Kenny hissed, "Looking for you." I said, "Okay. You found me, now get out of here." He said, "Going back to sorting." "Not until you tell me what's going on." I said, standing beside him and sorting pieces of meat. If I promise to tell you everything later. Leave? I hesitated. My curiosity had been piqued. What the hell is going on here? I said, tossing a piece of rotten-looking meat into a bin. Decide later. We can't talk about it now. I grimaced, knowing that he wouldn't let me in on the secret. I glared at him when suddenly I saw the supervisor come back and promise me we'll talk about this tonight at work. I said, I promise. Kenny replied. I turned around and walked away from him. She saw me and made a beeline for me. What were you doing on the line? When you haven't been properly trained, she demanded. Deciding, I replied. Deciding what this job isn't for me, I said, handing her my hair net and mask. I quit. She stared at me, jaw hanging open as I stormed off. I glanced back to see her, narrowing her eyes in Kenny's direction. I made my way back out to the hallway and followed the red line back to where I come into the building. I reached the exit door and I heard a familiar deep voice. Decided it's not for you. I turned to see the security guard, who I met on the way in that job's not for anyone. Yeah. It's no tiptoe through the tulips. He said to me, I'm sorry. What? I asked. It's an old saying, never mind. Why are you going out this way? He asked. I suddenly remembered. I was on the wrong side of the building. I figured I'd walk around to get some fresh air. I said. He narrowed his eyes at me. I went for broke and bolted for the door. I could hear him running behind me. Stop, he yelled. Much closer than I liked. I didn't obey. Instead, I hit the crash bar so hard, I nearly knocked myself backward. The door flung open and smashed against the outside wall. I hit the open air and was around the corner before I knew it. I flew through the brush up to the fence and panicked when I couldn't find the open section. Right away, he was still in pursuit, but further behind. He must have lost sight of me for a minute. I ran along the fence, pushing on it as I went, growing more desperate with every moment. If I was stuck inside the fence, it would lead me right to the main entrance, and I'd be caught. I was sweating from running, but also from the thought of going to jail. When a section of fence gave way when I pushed it, I breathed a quick sigh of relief. As I dove through the open fence to freedom, I ran to my car, not even thinking about the brush that had torn at my uniform and skin. I dove into the car and took off home. Only once I was moving did I look back and see Kenny's car sitting there, partially hidden. I wondered why he was being so secretive. I wondered if I had compromised him by leading them so close to his car. As I drove, my breathing returned to normal. Followed by an adrenaline crash. I barely made it home and fell into bed. When I woke, it was dark. I jumped up in a panic, not sure where I was, until I banged my foot off my nightstand and screamed in pain. Once I could breathe again, I leaned over and turned on the room in an eerie glow. That made me think someone was here. I looked at the clock and realized I was late for work. I didn't have time to change, shower, or anything. I just ran out the door and hopped in my car. The drive to work was a blur. I hoped I wouldn't get pulled over. When I got there a half hour late, I got an earful from my supervisor about not calling in to tell him I'd be late. I apologized and went about my nightly routine. This isn't the military, he said, but if you show up looking like that again, I'll have to write you up. I wasn't sure what he meant until I went to the bathroom and saw myself. My uniform looked like it had been run through a shredder. There were tears all over the shirt and
My narrow
pants.
escape through the brush had not been kind.
I cringed at the thought of dealing with customers, looking like I'd spent the night fighting off wild badgers. In the end, there was nothing I could do. I'd have to get a new uniform to replace this one and use one of my backups. I came out of the bathroom and nearly ran over Kenny. You ready to spill your guts yet? I asked him, "What are you talking about?" He said with a blank stare. "That's not funny," I said. "You promised you'd talk to me tonight." "I am talking to you," he replied. "You're a real comedian now. Spill it." "Spill what?" he asked. "I'm not laughing, Kenny." "Talk to me." He looked at me, and his eyes glazed over. "Okay, man?" I asked. "I'm fine." He said, "Okay. What do you remember about this morning?" I questioned. His eyes went a deeper glaze as he fell into a 1,000-yard stare. He didn't say anything for a long moment, and then it was like he woke up from a nap and looked at me. I went home and went to bed. I took a step back from him. "No, man. You didn't," I said. "I didn't," he replied. "You were at the distribution center." "Why would I do that?" he asked. I tried my best to find any sign but he was joking, and I knew him well enough to tell when he was serious. He was dead serious, and believed every word he was saying. "You told me you had found something out." I said, "What?" He questioned. "I don't know." "You said you would tell me tonight." I responded. His eyes lit up with curiosity. "Did I tell you?" he asked me. "No," I said slowly. "I was waiting for you to tell me." I wonder what it was he said, his eyes becoming unfocused. "Okay, man." "You're scaring me," I said to him. Just then, there came a beep telling me someone had ordered food. "I gotta get that," I said, staring at him as he stood there like a robot, trying to figure out an equation. I ran to the kitchen and started preparing the order. When it was nearly done, I saw Kenny come to the register and ring up the customer, "No 38. I called out, setting the bag of food on the counter. I glanced up and froze when I saw who came. It was the security guard from the distribution center. "So this is where you really work," he said, grabbing the bag. He shot me a sinister smile as he walked out. My fear melted, replaced with anger. I ran out the door after him. "Hey," I yelled as he reached for his car door. "Yeah," he responded. I approached slowly. "What did you do to my friend who?" "The cashier," I said, pointing in sight to Kenny, standing there behind the counter, looking like a statue. The security guard took a long look at him, then got a scared look in his eye. He said, ripping his door open and diving inside. "What did you do to him?" I said, grabbing his car door and holding it open. "Get away from me," he said. "Tell me first." His eyes darted all around. "I can't talk to you," he said, barely opening his lips and staring straight ahead. "Why not?" His eyes darted up to one of the many security cameras, then back to staring straight ahead. He ripped the door out of my hand, closed it, and roared out of the parking lot. I watched him go, more confused now than ever. I slowly looked around and for the first time realized just how many cameras were aimed at the parking lot. I went back inside and did my job for the rest of the night, trying not to let my eyes drift up to any of the cameras. I kept my eye on Kenny too, watching for any stray glances out of character. He was joking. I didn't see one all night. The longer he went, the more scared I became. When our shift was over, I offered to drive him home and drove off, looking like a robot zombie. I wondered if he would make it. I tried to sleep that day, but I couldn't get my mind to shut down. It hadn't been 2 weeks since Kenny had found that ring and started his quest for the truth. I got out of bed, having slept maybe an hour, and dragged myself to the bathroom when there was a knock at my door. I answered it, and there stood the security guard. "What are you doing here?" I said, through bleary eyes. "Can I come in?" he asked. "I don't know. Are you going to arrest me for trespassing?" "Should I?" he said. I started to close the door. "No, I'm going to tell you what happened to your friend." I stopped and reopened the door. He stepped inside, giving the place a quick once-over. "Okay, so what happened?" He asked too many questions. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I've worked at that place for a while now. And one of the things I've learned is you don't ask questions." "I don't get it," I said, confused. "He showed up about a week or so ago. He just blended in and started working on the line. Next thing I know, I'm hearing workers talk about someone causing trouble. I narrowed it down to your friend and tried to talk some sense into him, but he wasn't having it. That day that you pulled your escape act, they pulled him in and had a discussion with him." The security guard continued. "And that's what made him go all zombie on me," I proceeded. "You don't get it," the guard said. "They drugged him." "Excuse me, they have this drug they use that slowly eats away your brain until there's nothing left," the security guard continued. "Wait, they're killing him." I said, "That's the way it works." The security guard responded. But why? He looked around the room, searching for something specific. "Do you have an Alexa or any other stuff like that?" "No, just my phone." I replied, "Give it to me." I hesitantly handed him my phone, and he proceeded to remove the battery. "If they find out I'm telling you this, I'll be next." "Telling me what?" "The chickens," he said. "What about them?" I asked. "They aren't chickens." "What the hell are you talking about?" "They have a system." They drive unmarked white vans out into the streets, round up homeless people, and take them to the distribution center. Once they have them there, they give them a much more powerful dose of the drug. It kills their brains within hours. Then they process what's left. I stared at him for a long time. "So you're saying the chicken nuggets," I began, "aren't chicken?" He finished. I ran to the bathroom and vomited in the toilet. When I came back out, he hadn't moved. "This can't be real," I said. "That's horror movie stuff. You might be surprised how much stuff you see in movies. That's secretly real." "So you're saying my friend was poisoned?" I asked. He nodded because he asked too many questions. He nodded again. "Then why is he still alive?" I asked. "I don't know. Maybe it's a warning to you," the security guard told me. "May, you were there too. That's how they work. They can get to you anywhere. They can slip it into your food or drink. They can mail you a letter with a drug on it. They can slip it into your car's door handle. It isn't just street people. They grab protesters, whistleblowers, anyone who threaten their business. Do you know how many people disappear in this city? Every day, the security guard continued. "No," I replied. "Let's just say they process a lot of chicken. What about all those workers? Wouldn't they know it wasn't chicken? They give them a lower dose. Just enough to keep them from asking questions. I looked around the room, okay. Where's the hidden camera? I asked. His eyes started around what camera? The one for the reality show. Or whatever you and Kenny are in on to prank me. You don't believe me, the security guard asked. I don't believe you, I reiterated. He hung his head. I stuck my neck out to come warn you. Well, I appreciate the warning, I said sarcastically. He turned and walked to the door. Just keep an eye on your friend, he said, opening the door, and watch out. He closed the door behind him. It was nearly time to get to work. I shook off the thought. That was clinging to the back of my brain. What if he was right? I showered and dressed and made it to work on time. The shift was uneventful, except for my continual attempts. To snap Kenny out of it, he didn't respond. It was just before 3 a.m. when I saw a white van pull up. No one got out of it, and I couldn't see inside because it had tinted glass. I shrugged it off and went back to my job, mopping the kitchen floor. The guard's words came to me as I was doing my chores. I looked back out at the white van, but it was gone. I shrugged and went back to cleaning. A few minutes later, I came out of the back room because someone was yelling, "Isn't anyone around here?" An angry man raged at the counter. "I'm sorry," I said. "The cashier must be in the bathroom." I took care of him and went on a mission to find Kenny. In his condition, he could have wandered stuck in a closet. 20 minutes later, I was frantic. I hadn't seen hide nor hair of Kenny. I was even tempted to check on the roof, but the access ladder was still locked. It was starting to get busy, and I didn't have time to search for him anymore. Between cooking and running the register, I was falling behind by the second. I had a lot of irate customers. By the time day shift came in and bailed me out, I was so far behind. I stayed for an extra hour just to help them catch up. After my shift, I went to the supervisor. "I'm worried about Kenny," I said. "It's not like him just to disappear like that. Maybe he got sick and went home without telling you." The supervisor responded, "Maybe. But then why is his car still here?" I asked. He looked at the security monitors. Kenny's car was still sitting in the employee's parking lot. "That is weird, tell you what. If he calls in, I'll give you a call." "Fair enough," I said. Yawning, I drove home and fell into a deep sleep. When I woke, I felt more refreshed than I had. I went into work that night, expecting to find Kenny there, laughing at me for falling for such an awesome prank. He wasn't there. Instead, I had someone from the day shift who had volunteered to work overtime for 3 days. Kenny didn't show up on the 4th day. I got a surprise in the morning. I was making food orders when I called an order and the guard walked up to take his food. "Hey, have you seen Kenny at all?" I asked. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" he said. "Haha. Very funny, seriously," I said, leaning closer. "Do you think they did something to him?" he asked. I looked into his eyes and let go of his bag of food. He had the same vacant stare Kenny did just before he disappeared. "You have a good day now," he said with a smile before walking out. I suddenly felt surrounded and alone at the same time. I glanced up at one of the cameras. As its mechanical eye stared back at me, I stopped questioning what happened to Kenny. Deep down I knew they towed his car out of the lot. I don't know where it went to. Maybe there's a corporate car crusher for the vehicles of their victims. The worst part is, they continue to get away with it. I wish there was some way I could prove what I know. But I can't without going into the distribution center and getting evidence. I've got nothing. I keep coming to work for some reason. I've started looking for another job. I've written this all down in hopes that someday someone might be able to use it. That they would read this and look in the right place to discover this horrible truth. I've been feeling more tired lately. Maybe it's just knowing about this horrible thing that's happened and having no way to stop it. I wanted to write more of what I remembered in my journal, but my thoughts seem to slip away so easily. It's been a few days since I've written anything. I think, or has it been a few weeks? I keep getting thirstier for soda. I'm glad the company let us have free soda when we work. I keep looking up at the cameras for some reason, but I can't remember why I read the words on the page. I don't remember writing them. I see a white van that's pulled up. It must be a customer. It's nearly 3 in the morning. I hope they come in before the power surge. So this happened a few years ago, but it stuck with me because of how weird and scary it was. So every year for the past few years, my parents have been going on a week-long anniversary trip, leaving me home alone. I was 20, so it was more than an appropriate age. Well, this time around, some weird shit happened. The first day that they were gone, and then this happened. The night before they were supposed to come home. The first day they were gone. A guy came to the door to drop something off in the morning. But I didn't want to answer it, as I thought he'd just leave it at the door, like usual. Well, he stayed for about 5 minutes. And then he got into his car and started to drive off. To which I went outside, because I thought he finally left. This man got out of his car, leaving it in the middle of the road, just to give me my package that I didn't have to sign for at all. There was no signature needed or anything. He wasn't dressed like a delivery person. He was in a beat-up car. And he was very weird and uncomfortable, skipping to the end of the week. I was just chilling out my living room. And all of a sudden at 11 at night, I see this rather large figure approach my front door, so you can't see features, but just a silhouette, and this figure starts banging on my door. And he did it for like a minute straight. He stands there and doesn't leave for probably 10 minutes. And in that time beats on the door a few times over. Luckily, my sister and her family live not even a mile away from me. So I call them, and her husband comes to get me. I'm in full panic mode, and I realize that my dogs are in the backyard. My back door is 90% glass, and I was horrified that this person was going to come through the back gate and then try to come into my house. As my dogs were barking up a storm. Anyways, I get my dogs inside the house, and my brother-in-law finally shows up, and whoever was there was gone. He takes me to my sister's house, and we check the front door cameras to see who was there. The cameras had been turned off the whole time. This person was there. And for an hour before he started banging on my door, the cameras had been on before that time period. And during the time we were looking at the cameras, they were somehow shut off for about an hour and a half, which was odd, because they're not the type that needs to be charged. And they have never glitched before then, but were actually very sensitive. To this day, I don't know who it was that showed up at the house. I checked the local news, but nothing ever came of it. I don't know if they were trying to rob my house, or if they had other plans, or if it was potentially the delivery guy from earlier. But it still freaks me out to think about it. And I hate being home alone at night because of it. In 2012, as I slipped away, a stroke that killed me. I had felt an overwhelming peace come over me, like I'd never felt before. Things went black. Then I was ascending above, and I saw the city below. Next to me, I heard a voice from this orb of varied colored lights that also had a mist coming off of it. It was a woman's voice, and she was telling me how excited she was to finally be with her family and see her mom and dad again. I started to feel unsure and told her I wasn't supposed to be here. Suddenly, I was standing in an otherworldly place that was gorgeous. All the structures and buildings were made of what looked similar to marble, but it had an iridescent color between the buildings. Were decorated with colorful stones, with golden bezants lining the buildings, and glass fencing. I walked along the path with my arms crossed and holding to my body. I felt lost, and everyone around me was chatting happily with each other in these otherworldly clothes of satin like linen. Some people held hands and were close and joyful with each other. This place was absolutely beautiful. I came upon an old man who was sitting near a tree and what seemed to be teaching a class, with people surrounding him. Some were sitting and others were standing. He called me over to join him. He was teaching the lessons of what life is supposed to be on Earth, what it was originally supposed to be, and how humans were supposed to be, caring for the world and the inhabitants on it. But materialism had gotten in the way, among other things. I felt an overwhelming knowledge as he continued to teach this class about the world, the universe, life and death. Everyone began to surround me, and the old man put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "It's not your time yet. You will know when it is." The people from the class all came in and held me in a circle, and I opened my eyes and breathed in. I was alive and back in my earthly body. This is how I came to believe in God, and also reincarnation. I don't claim a religion, because my beliefs are now a mix of things. Slowly, that knowledge that was instilled into me slowly slipped away over the years, but I feel it in the back of my mind. To me, religion became several pointing to the same being. I don't need religion to dictate my relationship with God. If you're all wondering, I am 27 now and suffer residual effects that have disabled me.